But before that, we wanted brain to thoughts, we wanted more food for thought, and we wanted to make sure that we encourage all of you and getting to know about our next panel discussion, which we have really themed on the leasing legends. How is it that you'll get to meet the visionaries who are today revolutionizing malls with innovative leasing strategies? One of the most important subjects that all of us are facing today in the retail real estate market. What better than our next set of speakers to share their thoughts with us? Joining us on stage to moderate this session will be Mr. Saket, Amrit, Director, Advisory and Transaction Services, CBRE. May I request all of you to please welcome him with a round of applause, as I also extend a very warm welcome to all our speakers. Joining us here on stage will be Mr. Jude, Portfolio Leasing Head for a Mall's Prestige Group. Let's hear a round of applause as I welcome Mr. Rehan Haq, Vice President and Head of Leasing, DLF Shopping Malls. May I also present to you Mr. Ravinder Chaudhary, Vice President, Vegas and Unity One Elegante. A round of applause to Mr. Rohit Goplani, CVP, SVP, Head Leasing, Marketing and Corporate Communications in Orbit Malls. Please put your hands together for Mr. Milind Rohinesh, Executive Director and Head West Retail, Cushman and Wakefield. Also joining us will be Tanu Prasad, Vice President, Leasing, Nexus Malls. We've got experts from the field talking to us about how is it that they have created some very innovative strategies when it comes to leasing. So who better than them to discuss all this and more with us? I'd now like to hand over to Mr. Saket Amrit. Sir, all yours.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We are gathered here today joined by some of the industry's most dynamic and young leasing professionals, some of whom I'm proud to call my friends. Whether or not we remain friends after the end of the session, we would not know. But what we promise you is that we're going to have a very interactive session on how leasing have really changed over the last few years. What is the general environment of the leasing activity currently in the country? What are the gaps? How do we innovate better? And how is technology playing a part? And no better than this panel to really talk us through as to what has been happening for the past few years and what are the forecasts going forward for the next 3-4 years. Why don't we go to Rehan first? Rehan, you manage a large portfolio and you've been successfully leasing really successful malls for the last many, many years. Would you say that the leasing activity or the leasing environment today in India is most dynamic than it has ever been before? And why do you think the sudden shift that's taken place?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me here. Saket, there could change to hai. There's a lot of changes that happened in the last few years. And I'll take a step back in terms of if you look at all the current successful malls, most of the malls have been conceived about a decade and a half back, and those dynamics have been implemented and those aspects have been addressed in the best possible way. But as time goes by and consumption changes and patterns changes, sizes changes, and especially post-pandemic, there has been a sea change in terms of how we want to configure the new malls that we are working on. And I'll give my view and how we are working on the DLF platform, and then we can also, we can testify it whether it's the right way forward or not. So I'll take a step back in terms of data crunching, in terms of understanding how we are conceiving the new malls. So the first and the foremost, the basic question in terms of who are we, catering to? Who are we making the mall for? And therefore, that data is very, very important, essential in terms of understanding what is the current consumption pattern, where are the people going, what are the gaps, how are they spending. Understanding your demographic is very, very critical in terms of when you're conceiving a mall and building a mall. So those aspects, of course, in the last few years, data is readily available, it's flowing everywhere. And that data has to be converted into relevant information so that informed business decisions can then be implemented. Now, having said that, once we have crunched the data, कि क्या demography है, कितने लोग हैं, किस तरह के लोग हैं, कहाँ जाते हैं, क्या shopping कर रहे हैं, or you know the there has been a sea change in terms of how the new generation is also shopping. In terms of the, the online shopping, how things are changing. It's very dynamic. So most of the brands have also re-optimized their sizes, their best size. So for example, a hypermarket no longer looks at a 1 lakh. We started from 1 lakh, came down to 50, 40, 30, 20, 25. So now, even if you see some of the new brands, in fact, Carrefour also announced their entry, and I was chatting up with some of my friends. So, and some of the existing, hypermarkets, supermarkets as well, they're also all crunching into different formats in terms of, if you're a neighborhood mall, you're looking at a 8 to 10,000 square foot. If you're a big mall, they're looking at a 10, 15,000 square foot format. At best, they're looking at 20,000 square foot format. That's also crunching down as we go forward. So this is one category I'm telling you. So each category is now also re-optimizing their area. So that area configuration has got into a big change, especially with private equity also entering, so we have to be optimal in terms of the net operating income that you're able to generate. Therefore, how leasing used to happen about half a decade back, and now how leasing is being done now is sea change in terms of your anchor vanilla balancing, in terms of your net operating income projections, in terms of who you're giving space to, and what are the categories that you're including. So there is a parallel universe which is also in the making, in terms of the online brands, the D2C brands. They're knocking on the door, and they're knocking very heavy. And some of the brands that we have experimented with, we've been delighted. Absolutely, there will be laggards, but we have been to find some jewels in that 30, 40 brands which are now knocking onto brick and mortar. So hey, बहुत सारे aspects हैं. In 2 minutes I will not be able to probably
Absolutely.
sum it up, but I'll tell you that data is one point that I would like to highlight, and in terms of configuration, I would say that understanding your categories and deciding on what percentage you're allocating for a critical mass in a particular category. Category is also divided now,
Right.
so there are subcategories. So these are two, I think, most important aspects now that leasing is now.
I'm going
looking
to
after.
I'm going to pick up the second point that you made, which is the percentage kind of shifted for various categories, and I would go to Tanu with that question. Earlier, let's take an example of, say, entertainment as a category, which was largely confined to, say, exhibitor business, right?
Yeah.
You come to a mall, you watch cinema, you eat whatever is available in the food court and go. Do you see that changing out of your entire portfolio and your largest portfolio rather, close to 10 million? So where do you see that shifting? I mean, is that because we have to do F&B because there's no other alternative to that, or there's more consumer specific feedback that you've received to offer them more when they spend their half a day or a day in a mall?
Sure.
Your thoughts on that?
Thanks for that question. You know, the subject here is the shift in leasing strategies, right? And we clearly see that movement. Earlier, like he mentioned on FECs, if I have to be specific, we would just have one FEC in a mall. But today, you could easily see 3 FECs catering to different age groups. So for example, you have one FEC which is more like a play area for the toddlers. You'll have one for the teenage kids with redemption games. You'll have one for the adultish entertainment in terms of gaming and bowling with a bar, with F&B. So that shift we're any which way seeing today. What we've also realized, what Rehan mentioned, was that anchor resizing, right? Hypermarkets with the whole quick delivery thing. We're so convenient with, just ordering from the app and getting it delivered home. Resizing of large formats in terms of anchors or hypermarkets, we get the opportunity to play and rework on those spaces. So if we look at our portfolio, we've done that across with quite a few hypermarkets. We've done that with anchors. And we've also realized that the sales hasn't dropped. Unlike my other folks here who build malls from scratch, so they have the opportunity to design and configure stores basis the demand then, we acquire assets, right? So it's much more complicated to resize acquired assets because there's historic there's a lot of history, there's a lot of background to each transaction. But I think resizing and making store sizes more efficient is something that we've been working on a portfolio basis. In fact, even on F&B, if we look at it, earlier you would just have one coffee shop, but now you'll find at least, I would say, 4 to 5 coffee shops in a mall spread over every floor. You want to have a coffee shop. So yeah, there is that change in these categories.
Fantastic. Steve, I want to come to you. I have this interesting question that I wanted to ask you. You manage a portfolio of close to 10 million square feet, which is coming up over the years in various geographies in the country. Different mindsets, different consumption patterns, different ways as to people really say or view going to a shopping center as a leisure slash shopping activity, right? Do you see some of those categories which are relevant today or which were really big half a ticket back, as Rehan said, making ways to newer categories as well going forward? Do you think entertainment and experiential retail would sort of be the new, say, a department ranker? I'm taking a name here.
Yeah, Saket, that's a very interesting question. I think as leasing professionals for all of us, I think the biggest challenge or the biggest difference that we make is that we've got to be able to track relevance. And relevance is constantly in flux. So when you talk about changes that have happened, we saw a world pre-COVID and we saw a very, very different world post-COVID. Like we've seen entertainment and food, like customer engagement has become the key. Shopping is now just a byproduct. So a shopping center is not just a collection of 250, 300 brands. It's a lot more than that. It's how you capture time, it's how you capture attention. So I think it's constantly changing. I think what's helped us a lot, of course, and I think Rehan mentioned it, was the data crunching. I think our predecessors in the leasing world had it a lot tougher because getting numbers and getting data was a big challenge. Now it's at our fingertips. So I can sit in Bangalore from the Prestige head office and I can track the trading density of a brand in a tier 2 city in some corner of the country, and I know exactly how it's behaving, how customers are engaging. So it's a lot easier for us, but I think the trick is to ensure that we're constantly updated with the multiple undercurrents that keep happening. Like there are a list of brands which were hot 2 years ago, but have sort of plateaued off. Like customer spend is going elsewhere. There are a whole bunch of D2C brands which are doing some very, very, very exciting work. And it's our job to be able to identify them and to catch them at the cusp and say that if customers are going there, that's what I want my malls to be full of. My mall has to be relevant. It has to be where people are going. So that's how you create shopping centers. And of course, it's a very exciting time as well. I mean, the whole point of the game is to be able to identify trends. There are a whole bunch of brands coming into the country. The entertainment sector has exploded. So we used to talk, we had like 1 or 2 formats. Now there's a whole bunch of formats. There are local kids who are doing some great work, pushing the envelope with entertainment. So I think it's changing. I think we're at a place, and I speak for all of us, I think we're at a very interesting phase where this whole dynamic is evolving. And I think as any leasing center professional who's worth his salt, I think we've got to ensure that we are right there, that we don't miss out on the trends and that we're heading where it's heading to. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge and something we all have to be on top of.
You made an extremely interesting point when you said, how do we track relevance? Ravinder, how do we track relevance? I have a straight question for you. How do we track relevance of what is relevant today and what is going to relevant for, say, a 5-year short-term period wherein the lease expires? So how do we do that?
So doubling to the thought of Rehan and Stephen both, so we have started making the malls now readily available for the requirements of the millennials when we started off. Now we are addressing it to Gen Z. Buying pattern of both the generations are very different. One was shopper, one is consumer. So understanding their consumer requirements, they come with pinpointed approach. I will go to that shop, buy and move off. Earlier, visiting a mall used to be a family outing. That we will go, we will plan for 4 hours, 5 hours, stay there, have food, watch a cinema together possibly, and then move off. Nowadays, the teenagers doesn't want to watch a movie with their family. So cinema is no more a family affair. There are hardly any movies wherein I see 3 different age group guys are watching movies. Earlier friends used to go and watch. Rare sight today. So any mall who is getting ready for next 5 years, 10 years, this span is now, thus the leasing have stopped coming from 9 years to 6 years, 5 years. Buyers are changing, behavioral patterns are changing, and so is the offering by the retailer. So you see the same set of people, very, very traditional style of working, right from luggage to apparel and footwear to food. Everything has changed. Everybody wants more colorful things, right from every possible thing that we can think of. Initially, there were categories which were not very colorful, very appealing. Today, everybody is conscious about their looks. Money comes secondary. I want to take a yellow stroller, for example, for this trip. So that range might go from as low as, say, American Tourister Safari, going up to Tumi. So, but the aspiration is with the lower strata of consumer also. So you need to be very, very clear what demography you will be feeding to, and are you ready for next 5 years, 7 years or not? So that is what leads us in decision making and making the center ready for people coming in next 5 years, 7 years, 8 years.
Rohit, would you agree with me when I said, Ravinder just hit the nail on the head when he said you make a shopping center keeping the changing demographies in mind? And you're coming up with a decent pipeline over the few years and different geographies, which may not be just tier 1 cities, but tier 2 cities as well, right? Do you agree that, and how is it different from a tier 1 cities, the demographies? Ravinder talked about Gen Z, the millennials, and now we are already in the cusp of Gen Alpha kind of making their foray as serious consumers. So do you keep that in mind when you sort of come up with a new generation of malls now?
Yeah, definitely. I think I largely agree and echo the thoughts what all my industry colleagues have mentioned. But just to come back onto your question, honestly, the people on this dais have a tough job, right? Because the consumer need is ever changing.
Just me and Milan.
Right? So I'm just trying to tell that, yeah, we do a tough job and a good job as well. So the idea is the consumer demands are changing forever, right? And to give you an example, 10 years ago, Mumbai International Airport T2 was awarded the best airport and had the best retail in the country. Cut to last year, Bangalore T2 opened, right? It's now the best airport, not in the country, and has a phenomenal retail. I think by hands down, it beats the retail offering of the best assets in the country, right? So the consumer benchmarking or the understanding is changing forever. The second challenge we face, we are in real estate. We are hardwired, right? We have those 4 walls and the size. The idea has to be, how do we make ourselves being relevant at all times? With the changing consumer demand, with the changing brand mix, with the changing tenant and the trade mix as well, right? The core job for all of us is to be relevant at all times, right? Whether it's a category change, whether it's a brand change. D2C is entering, right? D2C is doing a lot of big stuff. Where in the second side, we're seeing cinema not doing so well, right? So how do we really balance it out is the core. And coming back to your part 2 of the question of tier 2, tier 3 cities, the idea or the way we're designing the mall is we're making it more aspirational and more casual spaces. No longer it should be only considered for shopping. We want to get integrated along with the community and the neighborhood a lot. And parallelly also do good for the environment. We're doing a lot of sustainable stuff in the upcoming development what we have. We're retaining few trees in one of our assets and creating atriums around it. We're building a large jogging track in the mall because after when the malls are shut, how do you utilize the asset, right? So that it can become a nice way for the community to come along, right? So various initiatives, we keep on doing it. And that's why I said our jobs are tough and we need to keep on innovating all the time, right?
Thank you so much. I think you made 2 really key relevant points when you said, even though you do tier 2, 3, and my personal opinion is now consumption pattern kind of gets a little bit more uniform because now you have social media where Instagram, the same trend is seen in Mumbai as well as Jabalpur, for example, the city comes to my mind. So, of course, Milind, yes. So the question that I have for you is a very generic question. I would like you to give us and the general audience your macro perspective as to where we headed with regards to leasing. We all know there's a demand-supply gap, and we were having a quick chat before our session, and you come up with some data points saying as to where we are, the kind of retail footprint we should have versus what we have. And even if you forecast in the next 5 years, it's not reaching where we should be, right? Is that because our consumption is not growing, is not keeping pace with the upcoming development, or is there some other aspect to it? Also, why I'm asking you this question is, if you look at today's market environment, your leasing of A-grade developments, the occupancy level are the highest at this point in time, right? And that's why you and I come in and we go door to door, ask you for business with the gentleman here, and some of them are kind enough to give work to us. Jokes apart. So I want you to give the audience a general macro perspective from a consultant's point of view, because you have a bird's overview on what is happening around the country, and not just specific to projects.
Sure. I think, to start off with, first of all, that we discussed, just before we got onto the dais was, yes, one thing is unmistakable, that the most populous country on the world, consumption is growing. Of course, it's debatable on what factors and what are the parameters, because there's discretionary spending and then there is, spending apart from discretionary spending. But having said that, I think India as a country, we have not taken steps, but we take leaps, whether it's technology or whether it's the way retail has evolved. Even from a supply perspective, referring back to a report we released 2 years back, the per capita availability of per square feet for retail space, we are not even comparable to a country like Indonesia or Vietnam. And we are a far bigger country by landmass and population. So if we have to even reach to a decent level, I think, all my colleagues out here and much more will have to add nearly in excess of 6 or 7 million per square foot. And of course, we know the challenges for that, right? It's not that there is no intent or there is no capability. There is. And as we also said, along with that, we have the evolution, which everyone is working on, understanding those trends. Keeping in mind, we are at a stage where we had malls of 500,000 were good at some point of time. Then we came to 0.75. Today, is 1 million enough, or is 1 million less? And that's something which, as Tanu rightfully mentioned, they have a model which they acquire, not greenfield, go brownfield. But there are some of us who are building greenfield. So even if today I am building greenfield, I'm planning 1 million, is 1 million good by the time I actually see? Because even 1 million is going at single-digit vacancy. And that vacancy could be intentional, because they need to keep space for some other trend, or they need to see what they need to fill up in that space. And then, like Rehan mentioned, sizes, optimizing. We had 100,000. We've seen that come in certain categories down to maybe 15 or 20, because what can the developers do? You have the asset already built, you either add. If you can't add, you carve out the same stores. And that's where, when we see that evolution happening and the trend, the overall aspect of it is supply is always going to be a constraint. And the only way when we go knocking, like you said, at their doors is that, okay, can we have a solution? Can we reduce some stores? Can we cut some slab? Can we, interconnect stores accordingly? But there is no other way than, I think, brainstorming together. And what we see as that aspect is that the pressure will remain. Countries like UAE can say that, we have a waiting list of 50 brands per store. I think we are not far behind. We'll have 35. Or maybe, some of the guys out here may have 50 as well. So I think that's where we are going, and that's where we are seeing the pressure. While some may say it's not great, but the job out here is tough. And I think, as Rohit said, all of us are doing a great job. Not patting my own back or their back, but I think it is what it is.
No, absolutely. Yeah. We can always have a separate IPC/developer session later and figure this out for ourselves. Great. Rehan, is that your house view as well? That we are way behind when it comes to quality real estate. And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. We also, when we speak to our clients who are based internationally and looking at India very seriously, the first question they ask, and most relevant question they ask, is where's the real estate? I mean, there are clients who have come to us said, too early for us, consumption not that great, per capita income not to that level. Most importantly, where's the real estate? If I want to expand in the next 10 years, I don't see myself sort of growing at that pace that makes business sense for me. Do you agree with that view? Or with the view which, with the point that Milind made?
Yeah, देखो दो तरह के प्रॉब्लम है. जो frankly हो रहे हैं, ठीक है? There is at one side there is a top retailer who is also shutting down stores, okay? And then there are these host lot of new brands which are also entering the market at this point of time. They're looking aggressively at Indian market, aggressively, and they're looking at India story. Completely believe in the India story. And I can tell you that about 30-40 brands are now queued up for India. When I remember in 2011 when we were doing the stacking and the planning for Mall of India. Mall of India originally was supposed to be 1.2 million square foot. तो 1.2 मिलियन वही देख के हालत ख़राब हो गई थी यार, इसको कैसे बेचेंगे इसको, इतना तो रिटेलर ही नहीं है इतना. When we started करते करते वो 1.2 शॉर्ट हो गया. We went to the board, we said 1.5 चाहिए. उसके 2 महीने बाद जाके बोलना पड़ा ये भी शॉर्ट हो गया, I need more. Finally we ended up at 1.96, about 2 million square foot. Today 2 million square foot is a reality. But अगर मैं बोलूँगा यार why don't you make a mall and let's look at a 2.7 million square foot, let's look at 3 million square foot, let's look at 4 million square foot. तो एक बार में लगता है कि यार ये नहीं कर पाएंगे, because so many brands maybe they're not real, but while you see that we are there, it's not that we're not there right now, but we'll be there in very soon. We'll be there because there are so many now brands which are evolving, Indian homegrown brands. There are a lot of D2C brands which are evolving. लेकिन the problem is much deeper है. मैं थोड़ा सा और interactive करना चाहता हूँ इसको, and I want everyone to also listen, क्योंकि बहुत मोनोटोनस हो जाता है, आधे लोग सो भी जाते हैं पीछे वहाँ पे, अपना मोबाइल निकाल लेते हैं वो सब. तो everybody pay attention because being relevant is a collective responsibility for everyone, even for the people at the back. Okay. तो relevant, how do you stay relevant? बहुत ध्यान से सुनना आप लोग. I'm going to shoot some questions so that everyone can carry something from this session. 3 bucket है, ठीक है. पहला bucket ये है कि and this is for your own self also. So everyone has to stay relevant. आज आप relevant हो तो आपके पास नौकरी है, आपके पास demand है, आपको जो मिल रहा है, आप relevant. How do you stay relevant in the market? ठीक है. अभी हम लोग relevance की बात कर रहे थे. We all have to stay relevant. You have to stay relevant. I have to stay relevant. The mall has to stay relevant. What is relevance? सबसे पहली चीज़ for everyone to think about that when we talk about our own self to be relevant, we talk about the malls to be relevant. ठीक है. तो पहला आसान जवाब ये है कि भाई जो बिक रहा है, जो बिकता है, जिसका अच्छा सेल हो रहा है, वो चलन है, वही चल रहा है, वो चल रहा है. अगर you're not catching on to what is moving and what is in the fast moving, like a bus. जो अच्छा बस चल रहा है उस पर आप चढ़ गए, आप ज़्यादा दूर तक जाओगे. जो अच्छा बस नहीं है, वो नहीं चल रहा है, वो ज़्यादा दूर तक नहीं लेके जाएगा आपको. So staying relevant is a big question for all of us. Defining what is relevance, understanding how do we figure it out. Now the real problem is we're talking about occupancy, but the real challenge is we're talking about 1%, 2%, we are at 98% occupancy and vacancy levels are the all-time low that we have ever seen. But the reality is that only 25-30% of the malls, which are the top malls of the country, have this phenomenon. While there is a lot of ghost malls which are coming, there are so many malls which are not able to see the light of day, there are layout problems, there are other problems. अब agile अगर आप नहीं हो तो how do you stay relevant? सबसे पहले तो आपको agile होना पड़ेगा ना. You have to unlearn, you have to do new things. तो the collective question for everyone to think about is that how do you make this your existing mall or whatever platform you're working on, how do you make it agile? How do you make it flexible? How do you make it growing? How do you grow things? How do you water it right? तो जो हमारा अभी करंट, फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई आस्क इवन क्या तुमको यार 30 न्यू ब्रांड्स ब्रो प्लीज ओके निकालो, जगह निकाल दो, गिव देम स्पेस. ऐसे ही करेगा, ना करेगा, नो यार, नो रे, कांट गिव यू स्पेस. Of course he can't give me space, yeah, because he's locked in an agreement which is at least 6 years, 9 years. पहले 9 साल था, अब 6 साल, 5 साल जो हम लोग कोशिश कर पा रहे. But the collective question for everyone to think about carry and everyone would have to chip in and think about it and come up with innovative solutions in terms of what kind of new innovative contracts and arrangements we can come up with, which gives the mall and the brand both flexibility in times to come. नहीं करेंगे तो नहीं कर नहीं पाएंगे उसको. Similarly, there are other things in terms of how you're using AI, how you're using, reaching out to your people, how you're communicating with people, what marketing and communications you're using, how do you creating belongingness in your system. तो bucket 3 है अभी भी, coming back to the original problem, कि relevance define करना अपने लिए भी और mall के लिए भी बहुत ज़रूरी है कि क्या relevance है, उसके लिए हम क्या कर रहे हैं बहुत important है. What are the things that we're doing to stay relevant, कि what are data points क्या है हमारे, understanding क्या है हमारे. और तीसरा ये उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए भी नया नया स्ट्रैटेजी चाहिए. बात करना बहुत आसान है, वो फर्स्ट आ गए क्लास में, फर्स्ट आ गए भाई, फर्स्ट आना वेरी सिंपल, एवरीबडी नोज हाउ टू कम फर्स्ट. पढ़ना पड़ेगा, पढ़ के आ जाओ फर्स्ट. लेकिन वो इट्स मोर देन जस्ट सेइंग इट, इन टर्म्स ऑफ इम्प्लीमेंटिंग बिकम्स द बिग प्रॉब्लम. जो लास्ट आ रहा है उसको भी पता है फर्स्ट कैसे आना है, आ नहीं पा रहा है.
Absolutely.
तो that's what my 2 cents.
No, very fair point that you made. Tanu, you
I
want to add
just want
something?
to add to what Rehan said. In addition to all the points that he said, I think it's also important to have a vision for the mall, a long-term vision, and also being, flexible in terms of mindset. Like currently, if you see, it's a D2C rage, right? You see all these brands, and I know that there are malls which are creating D2C zones and blocking spaces. Even the newer malls are rather blocking spaces, and they want to be more experimental because you visit malls and you sort of know the broad brand mix in the competition or your own mall, but how could you be different from your closest competitor? And I think it's important to have that courage to sort of create something different so that the consumer is getting something new when he or she comes to the mall.
Rohit, I have a question that I want to pick from Tanu's answer here. She mentioned that now you're creating a D2C sort of zone to accommodate those new brands, new age brands, homegrown brands which are doing extremely well. Some of them are really innovative as well and coming up with solutions which nobody thought that you needed, right? Is that a response to those homegrown players coming up, or you're thinking ahead for your new generation mall saying it's not a response, but we know where the market's going and we have to do it? Is that what the thought was right now? Or because suddenly there's a D2C demand, so you have to respond to that, and so that you're creating a zone saying, okay, sorry, D2C brands ko yahan pe laga dete hain. Is that what the market is thinking? Is that the general dynamic?
So one, definitely, this category is definitely doing well, right? I think we've been attending so many D2C conferences, and direct-to-consumer first brands, they definitely know that after a certain level, technically about 80 to 120 crores when they hit, if they want to further grow their brand, they have to come offline, right? So yes, definitely they are scouting for spaces in our malls. Whether that is a response for our side to give them space, the answer is yes and also no. Why no? Because we definitely work on not only D2C categories, but also various categories to which keep on evolving, right? Whether it is 5 years ago, there were no restaurants in malls. Now we allocate 12, 15, as high as 18% spaces in a new development mall, right? We've seen the LFF changing the landscape of F&B in Delhi, right? A lot of changing stuff happening in Bangalore, Mumbai changing a lot of stuff, right? Similarly on entertainment all. So I'm saying that's again a subset of being relevant and evolving at all the times because that's our core area. And I think leasing or working along with each category, keeping a tab on what the macro trends are, how do you really overlook out for those trends, and how do you start making spaces basically resizing, relocating has always been. From our portfolio, I think, if we talk about in Orbit Malls, we completed 21 years in Malad, and last year was the best year.
Phenomenal.
So technically, we've been beating our best. So it could never have happened if you have not done all of it. So D2C is just one of the larger elements.
No, absolutely. Shiv, you want to make a point?
Saket, I'll just add to that. While we talk about the fact that there's a lot more capacity for us to build A-grade malls, I think Rehan pointed it out, and we also did a study ourselves when we were relaunching our new portfolio under Forum Malls. It's what we refer to as the big $1 billion club. I think India has probably 550 to 600 odd malls. And maybe under 40 of those malls achieve 100 crores of top line every month. So if you actually look at it, success is not as easy as it might seem. You might say that, okay, you build a mall and you're going to do well. Absolutely not. The second point about it is while fads come and go, I think one thing that we need to understand is probably is something that is here to stay, is that we got to think beyond brands. Of course, everyone's going to fill up 1 million square feet, you need your brands. But I think the one thing that we need to prioritize is that your shopping centers have to become part of a customer's psychological habit. It's a habit formation. So basically, you got to ensure that you're making that person in that micro catchment you're catering to, you're making sure that he's comfortable with coming there to spend time, bringing his family. There's events that are engaging him. There's enough of F&B. There's enough of entertainment. The shopping is a byproduct. The shopping is going to happen. The moment you become somebody's favorite hangout place, it's only a matter of time before he's going to spend money and also realize he can go to the hypermarket and he can pick up his groceries and catch a movie. So you've got to understand that it's more about, we got to change our focus from saying that I'm going to bring in 250 brands and I'm going to reach out to RBL and Trent and X, Y, and Z. They're important. They're an integral part of it. But if we are truly going to see a lot more malls join that big billion-dollar club, we've got to ensure that we become community centers. It's where people want to come. It becomes part of their habit. It's something they like to do. I think Rehan's done it with a bunch of the malls. All of us have malls where people love it. It's become more than just a shopping mall. And I think that's the direction all of us have to start thinking about.
Very, very relevant point that you made, Steve. Ravinder,
So,
your final comments on the
small
whole
point
conversation.
to continue what Stephen has left here. So everybody talks and the parameter of a mall is judged by the consumption that they drive or the number of brands that they host. He pointed out very, very specific point. Be someone that a guy who's, when he's leaving his house with his family, feels comfortable at. It will for sure happen to be in that 100 crore club, and we will have more malls coming out of the same set of neighborhood, same set of centers. Just don't focus on 100 crores of consumption. Focus on 10 million people that feel like coming to the same center time and again every time. 100 crore will come to you, for sure.
Do you also feel the time has come where we start, maybe not immediately, but start thinking at a reasonable time to look at specialized malls? Is that something still relevant, or the time has come and gone, or we were way ahead of the time? Some of the people who tried doing it and weren't very successful?
So we have examples already. CBRE is a classical example. So they tried their best to do a 100+ restaurant under one roof, best of the locations, best of the restaurants. Some may say it was a little ahead of time. Some may say too much of F&B. But eventually, they were able to crack it. They were able to crack it very well. You see,
Just one example of it. I mean, overall, I'm trying to
so
understand.
similarly is Kamla Mills. So you have examples like that across. So you will not have specialty malls or specialty centers too much, but you will have in bits and pieces. FEC will take some time. Land cost is very, very different to fit in a concept like Disney World, for example, or something like a Universal Studio. So we need to get to a third party, which could be government bodies, which would be private partnerships, when operators and the land owning agency could partner together to make it a larger tourist destination. But specialty retail is around us. It is just that we are not acknowledging them as one destination. AeroCity is a classical example. Food is food is across AeroCity. So you see all the towers, they will have bits and pieces of your ancillary shopping followed by food. CyberHub is one, similar is in South. And I'm sure in Bombay, I've seen Kamla Mills, I've seen BKC is growing very, very fast with F&B. And there are people who will come and see similar things happening.
I'll go to Rehan with the same thing that you wanted to make
I
a
just
point.
wanted
and
to
I'll go
add to what
Milind and
Ravinder
come
is
to
saying.
Steve.
See, in terms of speciality malls when you're talking about, see, one is the F&B portion, which actually is now becoming more amenities into the corporate parks. It's become essential to, but that's not a speciality mall per se. Speciality mall is not a reality in India. Speciality mall नहीं होगा, बहुत कम है जो कर पा रहे हैं और कर भी पाएंगे नहीं पाएंगे. But I'll tell you what the evolution has been in the last. There is more consistency of direction in terms of positioning of a mall. And that is something which increasingly I see that, most of the marketing guys are also focusing in terms of, and the malls are by the virtue of, the years passing and the catchment also evolving in a certain way, has got consistency of direction in terms of where they're headed, what kind of people they're catering to, what kind of wallets they're attracting, and a set of brands which then starts doing well because they are catering to that particular audience. So for example, a classic is a Mall of India. And earlier a destination used to be for everyone, of course, so there is a bit for everyone. But increasingly, as the time is going by and you know, we're settling in with our footfall, we're still growing, we're not even plateauing right now. We're doing about 1.6, 1.7 million footfall a month. But we see that the value brands are depleting a little bit, and we're getting more traction with the accessible luxury formats and bridge luxury formats and premium formats. They are the ones who are actually clocking double-digit growth, while there is some degrowth which we see in some of the, you know, the value brands, the value brands. So we choose to understand that data is now pointing at that, you know, at least 60, 70, 80% of the audience and the catchment which is coming to Mall of India is evolving, and therefore the direction has to move in that side. So increasingly, I would see this phenomena everywhere. Wherever you have a million square foot plus or even smaller, the catchment will define, and the people who are coming, and you will have more consistency of direction. And this will reflect not just in leasing, it will also reflect in your marketing, in your social, into your digital, into your interaction with the BTL. Everything will become a little more consistent as time goes by.
Absolutely. Milind, I'll go to you with the same thought. When you speak to your landlords and developers across the country, do you sense a sort of change in thought with regards to not just doing a standard mall, a monolithic mall, saying, okay, these are my brands, these are my anchors, these are my F&B entertainment, and that's it. I'm going to just, you know, get my rentals in.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, a culmination of the discussion right now, right? When you are in the development stage, you're always thinking 5 years ahead of what would be relevant. And also what we see as malls and what we've been discussing right now is increase of dwell time, right? Increase of dwell time is directly related to your experience in that mall. What, like Rehan said for the audience, right? Something that is to be understood is how difficult, it's scientific, the planning of it. It's not entering a space, air-conditioned box, done in nice finishes. You know, it starts from the parking, it starts common areas, your restrooms, the planning, the zoning, how you want your customer movement happened. Where are you planning those stores? What are the right size stores? It's not your tenants coming and doing wonderful stores. Yes, that's very much part of it. But how do I increase that dwell time? By offering experience. What is the experience relevant today? Tanu mentioned about D2C, so did Rohit. Yes, you need to give that, but that's testament to the fact that one time there was a debate, will online kill brick and mortar? Never, right? You had to experience those products. But those guys came and are very much thriving in this environment. Second is, yes, the mix of F&B. Like say Cyber Hub, right? Beautiful. Did someone think so many restaurants will survive? We always talk of cannibalization, but no, they do. Is done right? Yes, it is. So everyone today is planning something that will be different. We can't do something very different. F&B will be F&B. Apparel will be apparel. But yes, how do we take those malls up? Like Rehan may face an issue that today we have Promenade. It was at a certain brand mix that they had at that in the country. Now we need to elevate that. Same thing, you know, with Rohit, with Steve, Tanu, and Ravinder. So we have to up that. But that is very, you know, important of how do you do that? Do it once in 3 years or once in 5 years? And I think that is what gets the customer back always. And coming in point, the catchment may not shift for decades, but what makes them that neighborhood center? Right? So I think that's the pull.
Steve, I'll come to you just in a second. I'll ask the last question to Tanu. Tanu, if we don't move towards, say, a specialized shopping center, as Rehan said, I don't think there's space for that and there's any need for us to do that. But do you think the leasing, the innovation is getting more scientific? And it has to be more scientific now, because now you have the data points, now you understand your consumers better and the consumption pattern better. Is that how you see your portfolio also shifting toward that side, your house?
Yes, in fact, you know, we have so much of data because we have 17 malls, and you know, whether it's footfalls, it's spend per footfall, trading density, sales, and we keep analyzing each brand's performance in their categories and across the mall. And I think that sort of helps us make strategic decisions, you know, and yes, it is painful to churn a brand and replace it because, you know, there are relationships, but that's the only way that the mall is going to be relevant to the consumer, right? Because sales is a clear indicator of performance of a brand and acceptability or relevance of a brand. And if the brand is not doing well, I mean, we do need to have these difficult conversations with them and try to take back spaces or resize them or relocate them. So yeah, data is extremely important.
Fantastic. This is what we want to understand. Our time is almost up, but Steve, I'll let you finish your point before we wrap this session.
I was just going to add one of the ways that Prestige is looking at developing as we're building our mall portfolio is we're also not doing standalone malls anymore. We're calling them part of what you call the Prestige Smart City, which also has probably 5,000 to 6,000 residential units across apartments, across villas. You have a hotel, you have an office block, and you also have a mall. So basically, you're not building isolated malls, you're talking to the infrastructure around you, and then it's also connected with a metro station. Because as we go into a time where convenience is the key, and it's all about how quickly you can reach a place and exit, I think it's also one way to think about it. We know mixed use work, but I think it's going to become the norm as our cities get smarter and as we head into the future.
What you're largely saying is the ecosystem is
absolutely
what makes it work going forward. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. That's our time, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you sort of heard us and maybe learned a little bit more as to which way the leasing activity is going forward. And thankfully, we all decided to remain friends after the session, and probably we'll have a drink after this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Saket, Amrit. And may I request you to please come closer for a group picture so that we can capture all of you in the same frame. And as we thank all our speakers here, I would like to share with you that we have some amazing sessions lined up for all of you. Yes, indeed. Very soon we'll be presenting our finale session. Till then, may I request you to join us for a group picture? And as we create this photo moment, may I also request for the gifts and mementos for all our speakers. And I'd like to request Mr. Saket Amrit to please present the gifts to all our speakers. Thank you so very much. What a pleasure having all of you join in. And also to thank our moderator, may I please welcome Ms. Reema Punya on stage, because who could have done this job better than you of putting all these segments together and these thoughts together. Been a pleasure having you here. And one for you, sir. Please allow us to present you with a little something. And please do come closer so we can capture all of you in the same frame. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.